The name Ottawa comes from the Algonquin dialect of the Anishinaabe-Moan language, and it means those who trade. When you hear the name Ottawa, most people consider it a buzzword for the federal government. But it's one of Canada's largest and oldest cities, with a history that begins long before the feds decided to call it home. My name is Brendan Ray, and I moved back to Ottawa in October of 2022. And if you would let me take a moment to introduce you to the city, I hope that you'll find it worth your while. According to the 2021 census, Ottawa, Ontario, with a population of just north of 1 million souls, is the fourth largest city in Canada by population, politely giving the lead to Toronto, Montreal, then Calgary. What? I hear you saying. Ottawa's got more people than Vancouver. That can't be right. Well, it is, if only because the city keeps on collecting smaller neighboring communities and bringing them into what we call the city of Ottawa. What was once a small town outside of Ottawa then became a suburb, then became part of the city itself. The city's been growing this way since the days before it was called Bytown, by grabbing a hold of these smaller communities and making them a part of the whole. It was only 2 years before being named the capital in 1857 that the city of Ottawa was incorporated on January 1st of 1855. Now I know what you're thinking. How could you not? The city is obviously a Capricorn. Steady, sure-footed, affiliated with the metal lead and the planet Saturn. This would be a great conclusion, if not for 2 major reasons. The first is that urban astrology isn't really a thing. The second, which justifies the first, is that on the day prior, December 31st, 1854, the place was not empty. People have been living here for quite some time, actually. It was called Bytown when Colonel John By incorporated some of the settlements way back in September of 1826. I suppose Bytown was a Virgo to Ottawa's Capricorn. Before that, Philman Wright set up a farming colony with his friends and family in March of 1802. Apparently Wrightstown was a Pisces. Etienne Brulé was the first European to stop by in 1610. Of course, the Algonquin had arrived on the scene centuries before that. What I'm trying to say is that the city didn't really have a start, but a series of starts, and a gradual evolution into the city that it has thus far become. The Ontario city stretches along the southern shore of the Ottawa River as it flows eastwards towards the St. Lawrence at Montreal. The North Shore, on the Quebec side, is the host of the city of Gatineau, connecting automotive traffic to the capital by 5 bridges, the Champlain, the Eddy, the Portage, the Alexandra, and the Macdonald-Cartier, and a 6th pedestrian bicycle bridge named after the Algonquin elder and chief William Commanda. The city also dives southward along the narrower Rideau River, as those waters flow northwards from their Frontenac Lake regional headwaters, crossed by 13 other smaller bridges within the city. This gives the city a bit of a T shape, with a long east-west stretch that hugs the Ottawa River and Highway 417, known locally as the Queensway, and a roughly north-south stem along the Rideau, flanked on the east by Riverside Drive and the west by Prince of Wales Drive. Many capital cities in the world become the urban personification of their nation. London, Paris, Rome, and Washington all project an urban history of imperial greatness. Ottawa is largely an administrative capital, without the local cultural currency of Montreal or Toronto, and so it compares more with capital cities like Brasilia or Canberra, always in the wings for Rio de Janeiro or Sydney, respectively. That being said, much of the drama of the emerging nation of Canada took place in Ottawa as a microcosm for a single city. In the emergence of modern Canada, in violence and peace, urban development, interreligious strife and cooperation, racism and multiculturalism, Ottawa became a shockingly multilingual, multicultural, multiracial, multiconfessional city with a history all its own. As I start this podcast, I'm envisioning the history of Ottawa in 5 chapters. The first will be looking at the draining of the floodwaters until the fall of New France in 1759. This will include talk about the Champlain Sea, an introduction to the Algonquin, the arrival of the French, and their early forays into the continent. Then, the next 98 years, when English settlers arrived, eventually creating Bytown and other regional centers, until the founding of Ottawa in 1857, when the communities coalesced from a collection of lumber camps and farms along the Ottawa and Rideau River into the last major hub of the Ottawa Valley lumber trade before shipping off to Montreal for processing and export. Then it's onward as the capital of a colony with an administrative class trying to hide from the violent, rough-and-tumble working-class lumbermen as the city becomes the head of a nascent democracy until the outbreak of the Second World War. Chapter 4 will look at World War II until amalgamation in 2001, as a Cold War capital internationally and a border march outpost of national unity domestically. The final chapter will be from amalgamation until the present. I'm going to be looking at this as a series of local events and personalities focused on the local. Even though this is a history podcast, each episode will include a final segment as to why this historical event or phenomenon is important today, why it matters, and how you can see evidence of that in the world today. Ottawa has always been a contextual city, subject to the world around it. Understanding that backdrop is important, and this podcast will go chronologically. So if you're not interested in a particular period of time, you can always jump forward a century or so to a period that grabs your interest more. Another element to consider about the context is that the forces that created Ottawa are much older than the city itself and exist beyond the city limits. Much of the story of Ottawa begins with people from far away, and their stories are a part of our own. I hope that you can join me on this voyage along the Ottawa River. A typical episode will be between 10 and 20 minutes, and my hope is that you can join me on this voyage along the Ottawa River, flowing to our present day, and can learn about the National Capital Region as something other than simply a byword for the federal government. It's a city that's grown with the country, and sometimes in opposition to it. Together we'll learn about the city itself and the world and country that created it. So grab your canoe and let's make this trip together. The official motto of the City of Ottawa is Advance Ottawa en avance. And I'll leave you with those words. Advance Ottawa en avance!